And report out of closed session.
That's pretty crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, clearly.
Good morning. Welcome to this October 17th meeting of the Trinity County Board of Supervisors. We apologize for the 15-minute delay to our start time. We do have a supervisor who experienced some conditions beyond her control this morning. Wanted to allow her a little bit of extra time, and as you can see, she's still not in the room, so trust she will show up shortly. We'll go ahead and begin our meeting, and if you will stand with me, Supervisor Frazier will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we will now go into public comment. This time is for information from the public on matters not appearing on this agenda or within the consent calendar. All comments are limited to 3 minutes and must pertain to matters within the jurisdiction of this board. When addressing the board, please state your name for the record and address the board as a whole through the chair. No action or discussion will be conducted on matters not listed on the agenda. However, the chair may refer the subject matter to the appropriate department for follow-up or schedule the matter on a subsequent board agenda. Is there any public comment in the room? All right, seeing none, is there any public comment on Zoom?
I have no race. Oh, Veronica.
Good morning, Veronica.
Good morning. Sorry, I turned around and you guys are on. Good morning. This is Veronica Kelly Albies, and I'm speaking with you on behalf of the Weaverville Douglas City Parks and Recreation District. I just wanted to say good morning, happy new week. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about this past weekend, which was filled with youth sports and festivals, and they were a driving force in economic opportunities and community bonding. Weaverville Douglas City Parks and Recs started their flag football and cheer games this past Saturday. And we took to the field along with, there was a TPA volleyball tournament, youth tackle football and cheer, baseball and soccer. Currently, our county can boast that we have at minimum 2 state-ranked volleyball players. Chloe Albies is tied for #1 in kills, and Gwen Hansen is #6 in aces, and that's in the state. And there are probably many, many more. Many of our scholar athletes move into their collegiate years supported by scholarships, both academic and athletic. And as these young athletes go through Parks and Recs programs, into private programs, and onto their high school careers, they are putting in the work to be the best that they can be, both academically and athletically. And as a participant in the economic development groups that are throughout our county, I really want to just bring this to your attention, that because it's no secret that I support some kind of sports complex or sporting place for these athletes to take their talents to and bring more visitors into our county. It was a great weekend of fun, family, and visitors, and they were out and about spending money in the county, and family members were spending time together. And that, I think, is a big piece of what Trinity County is about. I just wanted to say thank you to all of the volunteers and families and leaders that step forward to make these programs happen. It's important to the kids. They are obviously flourishing by that support, and I encourage you to keep moving in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no other raised hands, no chats.
All right, thank you. With that, we will close public comment. Moving into reports and announcements, reports from department heads. Are there any department heads in the room wishing to report? Seeing none, are there any on Zoom? All right, report from our county administrative officer, CAO Tetfield.
Thank you, Chair. So I got a couple items. First is the Central Valley project, the Trinity River Division comments. The county submitted comments to the Bureau of Reclamation Cooperating Agency's draft environmental impact statement for the long-term operation of the Central Valley project yesterday. Those comments were due yesterday. That's why we submitted them. The comments are basically the same as we had previously submitted under the board signature. This is just the next step in the draft review and comment process. So we basically used the similar comments, plus we emphasized the need for a separate environmental impact study for the Trinity River Division aspect, which is what some of the other agencies, to include Congressman Huffman, put forward last time. So we just kind of re-emphasized that and re-elevated that. And then we also have a meeting with the Bureau of Reclamation on the 31st of August to specifically discuss our county comments and county input, which I think will be good. And both Liam and Heidi have been invited to that. The 31st, of August, I'm sorry, the 31st of October.
We got a formal introduction, or I think last night or yesterday, we hadn't been formally invited as of yet.
Right, that is being worked. Yep.
And I'm sorry, I got caught up in August. The meeting is scheduled with
31 October with the Bureau of Reclamation, Joanne Beck.
And that invitation that you're waiting for, is it just a
It's-
formality? You expect it will happen?
Yeah, they've committed to it. I just don't know if it's going to be Zoom or Teams, or I assume it's going to be Teams. That's usually the platform the Bureau uses.
Okay, all right.
The next topic is cannabis, and I'm going to kind of summarize this. Rick will probably hit on it a little bit, or Rick and Dan in the cannabis ad hoc update, but there will be a public announcement, if you will, a quasi press release that will be in the Trinity Journal tomorrow. It'll be on the county websites this afternoon, but it basically lays out, the future timeline going forward. We had some great input from the previous public workshops, and we are very, very grateful for that. We are working through those comments. However, the county also has an obligation to meet a specific aspect of stacking, and we felt that we to meet that timeline obligation, we needed to pull that aspect out and do a specific standalone proposed amendment to the stacking ordinance, which we will bring to the board. It'll go to the Planning Commission first in November, and then we'll bring it to the board. The schedule is the first meeting in December, and that's on the stacking aspect only. And then in a parallel effort, the entire overall cannabis ordinance update that we've been working on is continuing, but the timeline is shifted a little bit to the right to allow additional public engagement opportunities. We're planning another round of public workshops, the 11th through the 15th of December. Specific dates and times to be determined, but that's the week we're focusing on right now. And then by the middle of January, draft 3 will be available to the public. And then by late January, early February 24, we'll get it to the Planning Commission. And then the plan is to bring it to the board by early April 24. So that does in fact shift that overall timeline to what we had been announcing a little bit to the right. But we believe that based upon the public input that we've received, that is the right thing to do for the county to get us a proper ordinance and to not cause additional issues or challenges for the cannabis division as they're trying to implement this program. I will send that specific ordinance or the specific public announcement, if you will, to all the Board of Supervisors right after this meeting. So you won't be surprised when you see it in other places.
All right.
Under kind of the communications umbrella, the county website under news and announcements has an area where we've been putting information and pushing out to people. They're currently 104 subscribers. And I'm encouraging any more people to sign up. We will be using that platform. We have been using it already, but going forward, we will continue to use it and push information like the cannabis ordinance update timeline that I just mentioned out on that in addition to other county areas. But those topics that affect the whole of county, we're going to be using that, and that'll be a push mechanism out to whomever those subscribers are. And that I'm just asking for anybody in the public who may want to subscribe to that and get that information, at least give it a try. An automated email will be sent to you whenever a new item gets published on there. So we're going to try that.
And the process for subscribing is intuitive if you log on to that.
You
page.
log onto that site, there's a button there. It's on if you look at the website, it's on the left-hand side. You can log on and see, sign up. Next week on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, I'll be attending the CASE meeting, the California Association of County Executives. That's where all of the California county CEOs and their deputies gather and work through some issues. There's some good, pertinent, relevant topics on the agenda, and I look forward to that discussion with fellow CEOs later next week. The last item I have is an attaboy to a staff member. This particular one is from the clerk recorder office, and the name of the employee is Lisa, and the specific comments are: super knowledgeable staff, was a very quick and pleasant visit. Lisa was amazing. So just wanted to provide a shout out to staff, and when we get those comments in, it's always nice to see that staff is in fact very responsible and knowledgeable in their particular area. And it's nice when the public recognizes that. So I appreciate that. That's all I've got for the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Kogan.
Yes, no out of county travel. I just wanted to thank everybody that put on the cannabis ordinance revisions or proposals that we talked about and Trent talked about just now. We had 2 meetings in Hayfork, 2 meetings in Weaverville. The first one in Hayfork was, very well attended, especially by the Hmong community. I think this was the first time I've seen real good participation from the Hmong community in cannabis related issues. They had a translator there. It was very productive. I want to thank Drew, Bella, staff, Ed, for doing a great job there, answering their questions. Long nights, both went at least a couple hours there. And again, 2 meetings here in Weaverville that were very productive. I'm glad we're kind of pushing back the timeline a little bit to get everything included. Rick did a great job facilitating that. I think all the supervisors learned a little bit of something in those meetings, but it's amazing what you don't know about that stuff. So I think we all learned a lot, and just wanted to thank everybody for attending that and putting that on, especially our cannabis department. As a TMC member, we are continuing to reach out, myself, CEO Tuthill, Joe Polos, and Tom Stokely, to try to come to some common ground on the winter variable flows, which we have about another couple months until we vote, probably the first week or so of December. So we are reaching out to all the other TMC members and trying to come to some common ground on what we could do or not with the winter variable flows, which is a very, very important aspect economically for Trinity County. So we're working on that hard again. All the water issues that we'll probably be talking about for a while, we will be talking about for a while. These are not quick. This is a marathon, not a sprint. I just want to emphasize that, but I think we're making good strides. And I want to thank Joe Polos and Tom Stokely for helping us out there. Phenomenal in what they do. That's it for me.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Lutweiler.
Okay, I had out of county travel to Reading for a NORTEC meeting. NORTEC is the workforce management organization that supports a number of counties in this area through 3 different service providers. And the meeting that we held last week was a strategic planning session amongst the leaders of the service provider groups and the Nortex staff. It was a very productive few hours, and we dug in on a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which was really, I think, helpful for the folks to step back and take a look at what was going on that was affecting the way they deliver services and the services they need to deliver. So the information from that will now be taken to the next Nortec full board meeting, and where we'll engage the full board in that. But I think it's great to see these organizations taking a fresh look at what they do, how they do it, why they do it, and how they might need to evolve. And for PSA 2, which is the area for aging, I will let Chair Cox provide an update as she chairs that group. That's it.
All right, thank you. Could I ask a question? Would you let us know what are those 3 different service providers that work with Nortec? For here, we have our Smart Center.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to pull their names up off the top of
No
my head, but
worries.
I can share them.
No worries.
Yeah.
Then they probably wouldn't be things we would recognize anyway.
No.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. All right, Supervisor Frazier.
No out of county travel. I don't have anything to report out that won't be covered in cannabis ad hoc.
All right. All right. So to start with, we had no closed session on our October 3rd agenda, so there was nothing to report out there. For my board report, we have received at a past meeting a request for detailed revenue data from the regarding the sheriff's office budget. So I visited with CAO Tet Hill about the best way to approach this and get the information to folks who are requesting it. Back and forth transactions are required in this world of governance that are not required in the business world. And so they are very different from what people generally would expect to see on a report. Producing something to simply hand to interested parties will not likely produce the level of understanding that is being requested. Administration does have documents for explanation and are happy to set up meetings to dialogue with interested parties who wish to understand. So would you please reach out to the clerk of the board, the email clerkoftheboard@trinitycounty.org, to request an appointment. And if that email address escapes you, you can certainly reach out to your supervisor and they will coordinate for you to be able to set up such a meeting. So Ashley's got some photos she's going to put up. On October 4th, I received follow-up information from the Watershed Research and Training Center Operations Director, Rachel Evans, regarding the volunteer event, which was held on September 23rd for National Public Lands Day. To quote her message, the Watershed Research and Training Center and the U.S. Forest Service partnered to host this volunteer event for the South Fork of the Trinity River Public Lands Reclamation Project granted to the Watershed Center through California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Cannabis Restoration Grant Program. Our team was ecstatic about the 41 volunteers who participated with our 8-person team. Volunteers removed more than 88 cubic yards, which is over 4 tons of refuse from federal lands from a single site near the Trinity Pines and Post Mountain community. The Watershed Center will have more information to share on this project into the future, but I just thought the results were stunning and wanted to share those generally. Thank you. On October 4th, I traveled to Shasta County. I met with a housing development corporation in Redding regarding Trinity County housing needs and potential collaborative efforts. To that end, a second conversation to include CAO Tet Hill and directors of our Health and Human Services and Department of Transportation is being scheduled. On October 5th, I traveled again to Shasta County. I attended the Governor's Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force meeting, which was the final regional meeting of 2024 held at Shasta College. The meeting focused on facing hurdles to workforce development, scaling up on projects for landscape level stewardship, and the unique challenges of managing Northern California's forested lands. I do want to say that Nick Gillette, our Executive Director of the Watershed Research and Training Center, and also Kelly Sheen, the Executive Director of Trinity County Resource Conservation District, served as panelists alongside our forest supervisor, Rachel Berkey, and shared examples of their collaborative efforts and the project's successes as they endeavor to continue increasing the pace and scale to reduce wildfire risk in our county. I had also shared at a previous meeting that on that task force dashboard, the treatment areas that you can watch in real time did not include Trinity County, and I had reached out to understand why, and it was just a systems error, and all counties are there and included, and you can log on, and those updates are provided by the granting agencies and are updated by them as projects are completed. So the weight is not on those doing the work to update the dashboard once that's complete, and so we can trust that those activities do get reported. On October 9th, I joined Supervisor Lutweiler at the fire chiefs meeting to provide updates on the legislative activity that has happened this year. On October 11th, CO Tuthill, excuse me. on October 11th, CO Tuthill, DOT staff. Wow, Ashley, mute my mic. Please.
I can provide updates if you want to come back to yours.
Wow. You have something to say?
Well, economic development and the others. Okay, all right. So we're going to shift gears here for a minute and we'll provide economic development and cannabis ordinance ad hoc updates. So for cannabis, the ad hoc committee, following up on Supervisor Gogan's comments, the ad hoc committee has invested 9 hours to date reviewing the public input that we received via the workshops and the emails and the comment cards. We are about halfway through. So we have, as mentioned, there was a lot of great input received, and we're definitely trying to do our due diligence and work through all that input and using that to help shape the input that we're providing to staff through that ad hoc committee to create the second version. As our CAO mentioned, the timeline for that has been updated because in addition to the great feedback received, one of the sets of feedback was, we would really like another shot at this. You know, we would like to see what you do with what we give you this time in a second version and have an opportunity to weigh in on that. And so that's a big part of how we and why we shifted gears and have moved to a much longer timeline, if you will, on that particular effort. One thing, as mentioned, the ordinance related to stacking is being presented to the Planning Commission earlier, and that is due to the obligation that our CAO mentioned. And so we will be presenting that here in the near future, and that will be decided upon separately. And I just wanted to mention one thing that has come up a number of times. There is in the proposed ordinance material, first draft, information about overlay zones, which are basically formalizing a way to deal with what we have dealt with in a less structured way with opt-outs. And so that process is being tweaked based on the feedback that we received. But the one thing that we wanted to clarify is that the way that this is being put forward in the proposed second version clarifies that this is about establishing a new process for these overlay zones, whether they would be opting in, if you will, or opting out of cannabis-related activities, and not focused on trying to revisit the existing opt-outs. So that was just something that had come up, and I think there was some concern, some confusion, and at least the board members of the ad hoc committee have made it clear that they feel like this should be about a process for going forward, not a process of looking back. Under economic development, oh, I'm sorry, Dan, did you have something else?
I think you covered it fairly well. The one thing the plan going forward is an amendment to our existing ordinance, which would allow stacking. We're not creating another ordinance. So we won't have 11 cannabis ordinances. We're just going to, as minor as we can, amend 17.43 to allow for stacking is the proposal.
Thank you. Want me to do economic development?
Since we're on ad hocs, go ahead.
Okay. And with economic development ad hoc, I was able to participate in what is now being called California Jobs First. Previously, you may have heard me and others speak about this with the name SURF, which had to do with economic resiliency funding and so forth. And apparently somewhere along the way, somebody decided that they should change the name. So the new name is California Jobs First. And yesterday I was able to sit in for our local representative, Nick Gillette, on the advisory committee for this group as they work through timelines and guidelines and processes and so forth for that organization. I think a couple of things. One, I was not only able to provide some input that I hope was useful, but I got information out that I wanted to share. The timeline has seemingly shifted a few times, and I think it's maybe less about the actual timeline shifting to there being greater clarity between the state and the regions about how this process works. But there is a group of funding called Catalyst funding, which is to help projects in the pre-planning stage, that you need money to help flesh out this idea and get something ready to compete for implementation funds. And that Catalyst funding is on path to be awarded in May of next year. So we had been thinking that that might be happening in the fall, it might be happening in the winter, and now it's really looking like, no, the actual awarding of those funds looks much more like May. And so the work that's being done between now and then is everything from establishing the selection criteria for choosing those projects that would get funded, the actual selection committee, what is the governing group that would make those voting decisions, because there is a advisory group and there's another group, but they haven't formally submitted to the state who will be the voting members of those groups. And so that's being worked out. And then just a whole process for things to be worked on. There are as many as 18 categories of, I'll call it, special interests that are represented and must be represented in the voting group so that they feel like there's a balanced set of input in those decision-making processes. And then there are subcommittees that are based on categories, like natural resources would be a category, housing would be a category. And so there are subcommittees being set up that will review the projects from that perspective. And then there will be people from these special interests or categories that will help be part of the voting decision. There's a lot of work to do, but one of the good things about this is that it tells us we have still more time for us to submit ideas to be considered. And I know that they've had a survey out. I have shared that survey in the means that I have available to me. Perhaps I'll also share it with CEO Tuthill so that he can include it in one of the county emails if people are signing up there, so that it's not just my distribution list or social media. But it's a link that allows people to submit all the information that this group is looking for to consider a project. And so if people want their projects to be considered, this is your channel. And so we want to make sure that's available. From a housing standpoint, as Chair Cox mentioned, there's been a number of efforts around that. Chair Cox, CA Tuthill, Director Presley, and I participated in a webinar that was focused on workforce housing. It's one a particular area that we've identified as a issue. And we noticed in that webinar that a number of people presenting, sort of the panel members, if you will, about the importance of having a housing study. That's kind of like a first step for you to be able to be clear about, well, what do you have? What are the needs? And what would a developer kind of focus in on? And kind of a critical first step. And we've identified people that will provide that kind of a housing study for us, but the funding is something that we next would have to focus on. And the rough estimate, without digging into details in a meeting, was between $10,000 and $30,000. So we'll just have to have internal discussions and figure out where we go next. But it's encouraging to see that we have available resources that can help make some of these things happen, and building upon the interest and connections that are being made. That's it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And thank you for the little break. All right, so to bring Supervisor Carpenter's up to speed, we're on our reports. I needed a little break, so we jumped to our ad hocs. I'm circling back. I've got a couple more points and then it will be your board report.
Okay.
And welcome, we're glad to see you. So as I was trying to say, on October 11th, CO Ted Hill, Department of Transportation staff and myself met with Brendan Finn regarding crosswalk safety. Brendan is the transportation engineer for Caltrans Department of Traffic Safety. In preparation for our discussion, Brendan ran a traffic incident report back to 2018. Our discussion focused on public concern over recent events and possible solutions toward improving safety and mitigating risk. Brandon completed an on-site evaluation and will have follow-up information for us on options to include potential signage, additional markings at the crosswalk, and as I had requested, if we could have something that is pedestrian activated that would light up that crosswalk, that would be greatly appreciated. Also that day, I attended the Weaverville Community Forest Public Meeting, which included presentations from BLM, the Forest Service, tribal partners, and the Watershed Center regarding trails, fuel reduction projects, stream restoration, and a timber harvest. All great projects, and the work of these entities is very much appreciated. On December 7th, this board will receive a presentation from Sandra Perez, environmental specialist with the Yurok Tribe Fisheries Department regarding their upcoming project, and she will have a letter of support requested for consideration at that time. The PSA 2 meeting Supervisor Lutweiler mentioned yesterday, those items that pertain to Trinity County would be two. First of all, the Trinity Senior Nutrition Program. We currently have 5 volunteers delivering meals, which are being prepared by Dignity Health Connected Living to the homes of 63 participants on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They are just about ready to launch their congregate meal service, which will be serving folks at the Church of the Nazarene on Wednesdays from 11:15 to 11:45. You must RSVP by noon on Mondays for a meal by calling the Trinity Senior Nutrition Program coordinator. And I have that phone number. We'll put that in the hands of CAO Ted Hill, and that can be for distribution as needed and potentially posted as well. Contributions are welcomed, but no eligible participant will be denied services for failure or inability to contribute toward a meal. There are an undetermined amount of people for opening the program, but they will have a maximum of 60 participants. They desire to take this in small steps. They are encouraging older adults to participate, and they hope to launch that program on October 25th. The second portion will be of interest to some folks in the community, just to know that the RFP process for the 4-year period 2024 to 2028 providers, this is expected to initiate in January. So for those in the community that have perhaps been the conduit of PSA2 funding out to our community in the past and would like to revisit those opportunities, that is on the horizon shortly. And that is the end of my report. Supervisor Carpenter Harris.
Hello, thank you. And I'd like to just take a minute to apologize to my constituents for my tardy. I am a victim of rocks on 299 and South Fork Road, so it just took me a little bit to recover my vehicle. Nothing major, just tire stuff. So I am sorry for that delay in my coming today. I have no out of county travel. I did attend something though that I'm an alumni of the California Ag Leadership program, and I did go down to an event there of my own time and my own finance. But it's always a great opportunity to network with people who work up and down the state of California in all different kinds of arenas, and carry the name of Trinity County with me, of course, everywhere that I go. So I was grateful for that. I am going to be attending on this Friday the North Coast Resource Partnership meeting in Eureka. I've spent the last week or so just in general communication with several people in my district with kind of long-term concerns that they have regarding the solid waste, having the sites manned and the ability for them to get to and in and out of those and the concerns for some of the site workers. It's something that the people have been communicating with me for a long time, and it's hoping to work with our teams to settle some of those. Also, working with several of the organizations who kind of cross the county lines between Humboldt and Trinity County, preparing for this winter, and some of the plans that we have to make sure that emergency services are networked and available across county lines. And then also just working with the exciting news of additional fuels reduction funds that'll be coming to Western County in and around the communities, and preparation to try to make our Western County more fuels, have greater fuels reduction and more fire resiliency. So lots of activities, and I'm grateful for the community that I'm allowed to serve, and for the people that live in it with me. So.
All right, thank you. All right, moving now into the consent calendar. These items include routine and non-controversial matters and will be acted upon by the board by one roll call motion. If a member of the public has any questions or comments on an item on the consent calendar, they may provide them now. A member of the board or staff may request an item be pulled and considered separately. Is there any public comment on any of the consent calendar items? Seeing none in the room, is there any on Zoom?
I have no raised hands, no chats.
Right, with that, we will close public comment and bring it back to the board. Do any board members wish to pull any items from consent? Right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion by Supervisor Frazier, second by Supervisor Lutweiler.
Supervisor Lutweiler,
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier,
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Supervisor Carpenter Harris,
Aye.
Chairman Cox.
Aye. All right, moving now into county matters. These items include non-routine or controversial matters and are listed alphabetically by department. A member of the board, staff, or public may request that an item be heard out of order. I have received such a request, and with that, we'll be moving our cannabis item 3.1 to be our third item. We will start with 3.2 environmental health, move into health and human services, and finish with cannabis. With that, environmental health item 3.2. Adopt a resolution to allow Trinity County Environmental Health to apply for a wastewater planning grant through the State Water Resources Control Board, Office of Sustainable Water Solutions, Division of Financial Assistance, Clean Water State Revolving Fund. With us, we have staff member Christy Anderson. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Board of Supervisors. I appreciate you hearing this resolution request. So you may or may not know, but we have an extreme high failure rate on the East Weaver subdivision in just outside of Weaverville, and we are hoping to apply for the planning portion of the grant to allow like a feasibility type study to see if it's feasible to tie into the Weaverville Sewer District. We have spoke to the Sewer District and the North Coast Water Quality Control Board, both of which are very supportive in this effort. We are running out of solutions, and I say that wholeheartedly. The last 8.5 years, I've watched failure after failure after failure, and there is no more room to keep correcting these systems. So I hope this is just the planning portion. This is just seeing what the engineer can put together, and if it's feasible to move forward for the construction portion of the project, it will have to be approved, and then that construction portion of the project will have to go through the sewer district.
All right, thank you. Question, Sierra Title.
These are failures of the existing septic systems on residential parcels up that whole subdivision.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Questions of board members? All right, hearing none. Would anyone care to make a motion?
Move to approve as presented.
Public comment.
For goodness sakes. Thank you. Wow. We'll open public comment. Is there any in the room? All right, seeing none. Is there any on Zoom?
I have no raised hands.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Frazier, for that catch. And now we will close public comment, bring it back to the board for any discussion or motion.
I have a
I have a
question.
motion by Supervisor Lutwiler. And you have a question?
Can I wait till, you gotta wait for the
Yes.
second.
So yeah, motion to approve as presented.
Mhm.
A second.
Second by Supervisor Frazier. Okay. Supervisor Carpenter Harris.
I'm just curious to know if there's been public outreach to the community. How do they feel about joining the sewage district? Is that something that the folks are hopeful for, or are they concerned about cost or changes, or what does that look like on the ground?
So this portion is just for applying for the planning or feasibility.
Just to see what's out there, what could be done.
Yes, and the total expense. Moving forward, they would have to go through that process, the Weaverville Sewer District taking the lead on the construction portion.
Okay.
We do all believe that there is majority of support for this project moving forward. And to give you an idea, the monthly rate versus the typical repair, it would take about 35 and a half years to get to that, of paying the monthly rate to get to that repair fee.
And the current sewage treatment plant can handle an increase of,
They do believe so, but again, I would take this.
we're researching all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
If this project were to move forward, would residents have the option of tying into the sewer system or staying on septic? Or would that be an automatic decision because the infrastructure then exists?
I'm not for sure on how that will look moving forward because this is just the engineering portion of the grant. The construction portion will come, they would, if we're approved, and then we get the engineering together, and then it would go through a second process through construction grant funding. And so the Weaverville Sewer District would take the lead on that if feasible, and they would have to do the outreach and make sure everything was buttoned up. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right,
Thank you.
Supervisor Frazier,
Aye.
Supervisor Lutwiler,
Aye.
Supervisor Carpenter Harris,
Aye.
Supervisor Goga,
Aye.
Chairman Cox.
aye. Right. Health and Human Services, item 3.3. Take the following actions effective October 17th, 2023. Number one, approve the job description, set the salary range, and add to the alphabetical listing of classifications a community health nurse 3 at range G228. And number two, modify the Health and Human Services Public Health Department allocation listing to read 3 public health nurse 1, 2, 3, or community health nurse 1, 2, 3, or public health nursing supervisor. Approximate cost in salary and benefits per month for a community health nurse 3 at A-STEP is $8,780. And with us, we have Director Cassis.
Good morning, Chairman Cox and supervisors. Thank you so much for listening. I don't have anything if you guys have questions.
All right. Are there questions of board members? All right, with that, we will open public comment. Is there any in the room? Seeing none, is there any on Zoom?
We have no raised hands, no chats.
All right, we will close public comment, bring it back to the board. Entertain a motion.
Move to approve as presented.
I will second.
All right, we have a motion by Supervisor Lutwiler, a second by Supervisor Gokin.
Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Supervisor Lutwiler,
Aye.
Supervisor Carpenter Harris,
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier,
Aye.
Chairman Cox.
Aye. Thank you. Cannabis now, item 3.1, discuss and or provide direction to staff regarding the following areas for the cannabis cultivation license fee credit/refund worksheet authorized by the Board of Supervisors on March 1st, 2022. Potential establishment of an end date for credit refunds to be applied, guidelines around credit refunds for applications deemed inactive, and guidelines around credit refunds as it relates to license transfers. Currently, $579,773 in credits have been issued, with $222,193 potentially remaining. Cannabis Division Director Plabani, good morning.
Good morning, Chair, Supervisors. Drew Plabani, Cannabis Division Director. as you just introduced the item, essentially, we've agendized this to, I guess, have a discussion and hopefully receive guidance from you all as it relates to the credit refund worksheet process that was established in 2022. If you would like, I can kind of do my best or give my best attempt to take you through a narrative that describes kind of how it was initiated and how we've arrived at the present moment. Would that be helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So essentially, as a result of the TAA lawsuit and then subsequent court proceedings, the program was shut down in September 2021. Along with, I think, this predates my time working for the county. So I'll do my best to just give, my best understanding of what happened. But essentially, leading up to the program shutdown, a process that we refer to as the UO extension letter was established, which essentially was a set of criteria to determine if licenses that were previously active were deemed active, and rather than providing them with a full license renewal, they were given a UO extension letter. So there was a series of criteria established to determine whether or not program participants at that time would receive a UO extension letter. In March of 20.
I'm sorry, Drew, can I just pause for a
Please.
second? So what is a UO?
It stands
Extension.
for Urgency Ordinance Extension Letter, and I don't know how we landed on that title, but that is what it is.
I believe council can provide additional information if requested.
Absolutely. Yeah. I actually don't know why we call it a UO. It is for urgency ordinance, but I don't know why we've taken that acronym. It's not a legal acronym. It's just an internal acronym.
And what was its impact in this case, Drew? We so we weren't doing the full permit, but we were doing this. What did this mean to them?
This meant that rather than receiving a license renewal, they essentially received this letter as some sort of equivalent to a license renewal. And all of the letters essentially stated that whatever their previous calendar year renewal would have been, so say March to March, as an example, that license that became active on, let's say, March 2020. Actually, that's a terrible example. Let me go with a different date. A license that became active in October 2020, rather than expiring on that, the calendar year, October of the following year, 21, sorry. So licenses, let's say October 20 that were good till October 21 were cut short on September 5th, 21. So the credit refund worksheet.
Just for a brief clarification, the court allowed till October 31st, 2021 before all the temporaries expired. So that's the cutoff date. The court hearing was on September, but they gave a little time for the process. So that's the date. I just want to make sure we're using.
Okay, thank you.
October 31.
October 31, 2021. That's when they were all deemed expired.
So at some time in March of the following year, as you can see in the backup, staff basically came before the board and the credit refund worksheet process was established. You can also see in the backup that there are two documents. One was sort of the initial procedures for processing the credit refund worksheets, and then a subsequent SOP to clarify essentially what was clarified in that second board meeting, which to summarize it, the confusion was that the original credit refund worksheet process was calculating the number of days that a licensee lost from their annual license based on the date of the UO extension letter, which was not an appropriate date to utilize. So after that was clarified, essentially at some point following that, probably in early summer of 22, the process was revisited. At that point, according to staff, We had roughly 200 credit worksheets on file that had been received since it was authorized by the board. And pretty much all 200 of those needed to be redone to capture the dates from their license issuance date to the date of program shutdown versus from their license issuance date to the UO extension letter date, which just didn't capture the situation at all. So throughout last year, essentially all of the credit refund worksheets that had been received, let's say prior to May of 22, were revisited by staff and recalculated and sent back to the applicants who had previously submitted a credit refund worksheet done with the incorrect process. Following that, basically the process has been that when a project is completed and the applicant comes in to pay for and pick up their new license, that the credit value determined in the credit refund worksheet was applied to their licensing fee. And so that is where we came up with essentially, having credited $579,773. And I don't know if you have questions now. I can kind of continue to give a little more background in terms of the part of this whole process was the transition plan that happened along with the adoption of the EIR. And then there were essentially priority groups that were established based on their licensure status at that time. Priority one or phase one applicants, there were 308, according to the records that we have, that were qualified and received a UO extension letter. Of that, let me pull up the numbers. Of those 308, 236 of them have an approved credit refund worksheet that was on file. Of those 236 credit refund worksheets, 161 were applied to licensing fees, which gets us to that roughly $600,000 in credits that have been applied, with 72 credit refund worksheets on file remaining to be applied at the time of license payment.
So the fact that they're still on file, is that simply because the applicant hasn't come in to apply for the new permit for it to be credited against?
Of the 76 remaining, they have submitted a renewal application, or there was a renewal application on file. Essentially, we're capturing it based on Appendix C submissions. So for those 76 remaining, we do have Appendix C submitted for them, but for a variety of reasons, those projects yet either haven't been completed in terms of the environmental review, or that, yes, in some cases, they just haven't come in to pick up their license.
Okay. And the program again stopped just under 2 years ago. October 31st, 2021. We're a couple weeks away from 2 years since then. And this was put in place by the board to credit for the lost days against the next application fees.
Correct.
And of that, with what you've described, we have issued just under $580,000 worth of credits. That means they qualified, they met the criteria, they had their worksheets, it was calculated under the right corrected dates, and they submitted and were credited against whatever they were about to pay.
Correct.
And all of them would have paid in full the first time. In other words, if I'm getting a credit for 350 days of 365 because the program was cut off and I paid, did I have to have paid the $5,000 for you to give this back to me? Or do you figure that in your calculations that if I'd only paid my $2,500 up front, you're only crediting the portion of the 25, I think you see where I'm going. I'm trying to make sure I understand.
You are correct. The credit refund worksheet itself does not capture the fact that there were policy changes, you could say, from 21 into 22, where initially towards the end of 21, the standard had been $2,500. Well, previously the standard had been, full payment renewal.
Okay.
At some point that shifted to half down. And then at some point that shifted back to full payment and then shifted back to half down. So we've gone through manually and verified, what their last payment was, the date of the payment, and then prorated the daily value for those that only paid half down because the daily value was calculated based on a full payment.
Gotcha. And interestingly, I'm trying to, again, I know we don't, is it okay for me to go ahead and interact in this way with my
You're asking
questions?
questions.
Yeah. In my very layman's terms, in general, it seems like majority of our cultivation is taking place with outdoor. Is that fair?
Sure, outdoor greenhouse, yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I usually hear that, the season starts in June and ends in October-ish for harvest. And so if we were talking about October 31st, it was pretty much done.
So if I'm following where you're going with that, let me see if I can come up with a better date range. So let's say someone had a license issued February 2020, they paid in full. They had a valid license for a full year until February of 21. At that point, they may have paid either full or at some point, during the 21 calendar year, they may have paid half. Either way, essentially, let's just assume that they paid full again in February of 21. Then what they lost was October 31st to whatever day in February of 22. So the credit refund worksheet essentially compensated them for the loss of the number of days from October 31st to February. And yes, I would agree that the majority of our program does operate, under seasonal conditions. That being said, in order to maximize productivity for a given cultivation season, cultivators that are outdoor often start in January or February, starting plants, which then don't get planted until April, May, and then harvested, sometime throughout the summer or the fall. So yes, generally, that seasonality does apply, but there are activities that occur, not during the growing season, such as, vegetative growth, prepping for the next season, or the post-harvest activities associated with the prior season's harvest.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying, because I was kind of stuck in that much more basic understanding of the timing. But what I took from what you said is, in one way or another, it sounds like a very laborious, painful process. You were validating that I am only receiving a credit for the number of days for when I was in and out of the program and for the amount that I had paid for that piece. So I didn't get credit against 5,000 if I paid 2,500. I didn't get credited for a whole year if I was 9/10 into my year. All that kind of stuff, all was calculated in the process.
Correct.
Okay. And the difference between the ones that we have on file but haven't paid, it sounds like, is primarily because we have not received and or completed review of a new permit.
We have not, yes, I think generally it would be fair to say that we have not finalized or approved their environmental document, which is, the bulk of what needs to happen from a review standpoint in order for them to qualify for, a new license or a fresh renewal.
And some of that could be because of when things were submitted to us, and some could be based on our resource limitations.
I would say the majority of those outstanding projects are a result of the applicant's failure to resubmit the required documentation
Okay,
related to an incomplete letter or deficiency letter from the environmental review of their Appendix C document.
okay.
And Drew, those applications are the 72 that we're looking at now that are outstanding?
Those remaining projects that amount to that $200,000 total are the outstanding projects that have not yet received final approval and aren't ready to be picked up or to pay for a new license or fresh license.
And go ahead.
So I guess if everything was equal there in amount of refund, you're looking at about 3,000 per person on 72 by 222,000.
And, given that it's a rolling calendar year renewal process, sure, roughly, 50%, some people lost 90 something percent of their year. Some people lost 10% of their year. And that is the average dollar amount where we landed. Yeah.
And are there others that are qualified that could still submit a worksheet but have not?
Let me look at the numbers again. I would say limitedly, yes. But I would expect that since most of these credit refund worksheets have been on file for an extended period of time, and the main qualifier to submit that was a UO extension letter, that, there were 308 of those phase 1 applicants that received a UO extension letter. We've received 420 some odd Appendix Cs. So I haven't actually gone back through and verified individually whether or not 100% of those 308 have submitted an Appendix C document, but I would say yes, the vast majority, submitted a credit refund worksheet, as you can see reflected in the total number that we received, and likely the majority of them, given that we've received, 150 plus more Appendix Cs beyond the 270-ish credit refund worksheets from those 308 phase 1 applicants. Yeah.
And I'm gathering one of the things that we did not calculate in all of this is the cost of the services we delivered related to these permit applications. In other words, the board apparently took an approach that this permit allows you to do something, and that right, if you will, that ability was taken away by the settlement agreement. But when we do fee studies and such, we're looking at how much money does it cost us to process and approve an application. And so some of these fully approved, fully inactive, or fully active permits, which meant you did all the work, spent all the money getting it approved, but now we're giving it all back because they didn't get to participate in the program because of the shutdown. And so there's probably been no way for you to calculate, well, we spent all 5,000 that we're giving back on this one. We spent 2,000 of we just wouldn't have a way to capture that information, but we're clearly in some fashion giving back money that we spent to process a permit, the fees of which are ideally, I know we're still working on the fee study, but the fees of which are supposed to cover the cost of delivering the process.
That's exactly correct. So the fees are primarily utilized up front, from the staff work to the site inspections and the monitoring process. So from a legal perspective, the fee was satisfied. There was no legal obligation to return the money. The board did that as I don't even know what to call it. They were working with the community to try to make the program successful, but they were not legally required to do it. And so as a result, again, the money has been spent by the county. It is an upfront spend. It's the time, expenses, and labor that goes into the fee. It is not a privilege to utilize it for a year. It's a privilege to receive it at one time. And so just want to make that clear.
Thank you. I'm sure I'll have more, but I'll stop for now.
And then I just want to add sort of to your question and Margaret's response that essentially, you can see the fiscal impact that choice made. And that was very much related to the financial situation that we found ourselves in during the last fiscal year, needing to come before you all and request a loan. That was a significant, impact and part of the reason that that's where we landed from a fiscal perspective.
Now, you're basically doing a lot of work that you're having to give the money back for.
Yeah, and dollars that had already been expended. So we were
Right.
offsetting it even in the next fiscal year, which is why we're
Yeah.
still scrambling to catch up.
Okay.
I have a quick question. if you might. Perhaps you said it in just a different way. My brain needs to ask it this way to get it though. I see that you can select the credit towards the future license or a refund. Of the, I believe it's 76 that have not done either one. Of those, how many are requesting the refund versus the credit? And if they're requesting the credit, but their Appendix C has not met our requirements yet, and they've kind of been setting in this, hanging there sort of, will they have to come back and transfer that request for credit to a request for a refund in order to have that taken care of?
So the credit refund worksheets that are remaining have been requested essentially to be credits, not refunds.
Okay.
There's been a little bit of a shift procedurally where, and I don't know the total number. It was a very, very few, I want to say less than 10 off the top of my head, that were actually processed as refunds.
Mhm.
The policy that has been established subsequently is that if an applicant is requesting a refund, then we have established that they would also need to submit a formal withdrawal of that project from the program. So the remaining credit refund worksheets are sitting there as credits. Had they requested it as a refund, we would have given them the withdrawal form. They would have submitted the withdrawal form and we would have processed their refund.
Okay, thank you.
You probably stated this, but the 72 that are remaining, none of those people are requesting refunds. These are all credits and applications that are sitting waiting for their Appendix C paperwork to go forward.
Yes, generally. Yep. None of them, we've had some back and forth with individual applicants about, I want a refund, and then for the most part, when we've said, okay, well, you're going to have to formally withdraw from the program, they've decided not to go that route and basically leave it on file to be credited to their
Okay,
next
understood.
licensure.
Sure,
period.
thank you. And so to be clear, the question before us today, you've asked for some discussion and direction. What is your question? You want us to direct you to?
Well, since I wasn't part of county staff at the time that this was established, I could make some assumptions or infer what the goal was. However, I don't know for sure. So that's why I wanted to bring it back to you all to have this discussion, since it was authorized and established, by board action. Essentially just clarifying, as Rick pointed out, it's basically been 2 calendar years. Should we continue to keep these credits on file indefinitely? Should we cut them off at some point, at the end of this calendar year, or any other, date that you all would like to establish, and just provide clarification and not make assumptions on what the original intent of the board was through this
Sure.
action.
Yeah, thank you for that. And also, of these 72 that are outstanding, would you say, how could we characterize why it's taken 2 years?
Well, a year plus, was spent in generally just getting through the backlog, probably the better part of 18 months getting through the backlog. And so these remaining projects, I can't speak on a sort of case by case basis, but generally I would say they're either missing a piece of documentation that is required in their Appendix C document, And there's also been some turnover with local county consultants. So we have some projects that were prepared by consulting companies that are no longer in existence. So some people are kind of stuck there in terms of not having contracted with a new qualified professional, or, perhaps not being able to cover the additional costs to switch consulting companies and make the required changes. Staff has gone through each of these outstanding projects probably at least 3 times, somewhere between 3 and 5 times, and reached out to the applicant to try and encourage them to cross the finish line. I think that's sort of part of why I want to have this discussion, is that perhaps this is motivation for people to come in and utilize the remaining credit, to kind of encourage them. If they don't use it, they're going to lose it, and sort of help steward them across the finish line.
Sure. And based on, again, broad brush stroke here, based on these multiple reviews that you've made, and in looking how you might incentivize a motivation to finish the project, because every time you review, it's more staff time. Can you give an estimate as to what you think if everyone put on their running shoes and headed for the finish line? What kind of a time frame do you think they could be completed in?
Financial considerations on, from the applicant aside, certainly by the end of this calendar year.
Okay.
If they resubmitted the required documentation, most of the projects are very close to being completed. So yeah, if we got everything we needed in today, no doubt they'd all be processed long before the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
Yep.
So for county council, I think I want to come back to something you said earlier, that there was no legal obligation for the county to issue this kind of a credit or refund.
Correct.
Once the board made this arrangement, is there any legal obligation to continue it?
No, and I appreciate Drew reaching out to me prior to be able to do the research, which I did draft a memo and provided to the board, and looked into it at length. And based on what was done, it is not a permanent ongoing obligation. The board can take the same action it took to enact the refund to remove the refund.
Okay. So when we talk about what potential staff direction could be, it could be keep going, have fun, give away more money. It could be stop the program as soon as you can get it back to the board. We'll consider a decision to stop the program. It could be put a time limit on the program that says if these are completed by this date, then they will be still considered under the previously approved program. After that, they won't be. All of those things would be viable options and fully within the board's authority. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm sure I'll have more, but public comment probably will help us.
Do you have questions?
I'll have discussion later.
Okay. Questions here?
I guess this is not a question, but this sheds a little bit of light on the reason that you came up with a shortfall this year. You needed to have $800,000+ put aside for the possibility of paying out all these folks, which is about the amount of money that you came and looked for.
Were you saying we did not have that set aside?
No, I'm saying that you did, but that's a burdensome amount of money. Especially when we got $222,000 still not paid out, that I think that the planning cannabis department could probably use. In my mind, if you haven't picked up your money yet, I would think that if we gave you a date, maybe later in the year, end of this year.
Yeah, well, we did not have that money set aside, and that certainly would have been a prudent fiscal choice to,
Without a
take
doubt.
that into consideration during budget preparation.
Understandable.
Okay. With that, we will Thank you, Dr. Babani. We will open public comment. Is there any in the room? Seeing none, is there any on Zoom?
I have no raised hands. Never mind. Lisa?
I'd be surprised.
Good morning, Chair. Supervisors Lisa Wright from Lewiston. Just wanted to provide some additional context. The 75 or 72, I believe Drew said, that are in some kind of pending mode that comprise the 200-some thousand in outstanding fee credits not yet given. Not all of those are due to the applicant not responding. So I think it'd be interesting to see the breakdown. For example, I have one applicant with whom the application sat with staff and county council for 6 months, reviewing where the APN was located before it moved to technical review, and now has been stuck another 4 months. So there are some things that aren't the responsibility of the cultivator or fall as a shortcoming or a deficiency with the actual applicant. Some of it does come back to lack of processing on the county's part. So I think those should be separated. I fully understand that there's a shortfall this year. And there were 500 some that was previously awarded. So there's just the 200,000 that could be potentially regained. There's no fee study that's been done, so we can't assume that it cost the 5,000. I think there was some discussion between Supervisor Lutweiler and County Council about that. So we can't assume that without any kind of supporting evidence that it costs that. And the decision was made to grant these credits, and I think they should be honored for those that have responded according to the county's requests, and not penalized when other people did receive those same fee credits. People who have not responded, I think it's absolutely reasonable that timelines be put on that response. And I think that should be done anyway, regardless of the fee credit, that if they haven't responded by a certain date, that puts them into an inactive status and there would need to be a reapplication. I believe that process has already started. And then just a comment regarding transfers. So somebody might be sitting with a fee credit. There's a transfer that's done simultaneously with a license issuance, and a question came up of should that credit be applied to the transfer? Well, that was for administrative ease. We could certainly do the issuance under the old license and then do it under the new applicant. So I would ask that those be honored, that those fee credits be honored for the transfers as well. We don't want it to look like the county or anyone is stonewalling. I think that was a term that was used at the Planning Commission the other night to try to draw something out to gain financial benefit. So looks like I'm running out of time, but just some input for you there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no other raised hands.
All right, thank you. With that, we will close public comment, bring it back to the board.
I have questions of if you can. Regarding that public comment, can you of the number that are left, how many is there a way to splice out the ones where maybe we have caused delay or there's been a situation? Can you splice those out? But even if you did that, you just said earlier that if things are moving, we could surely get those taken care of by the end of the year. So if there was a potential sunset of the refund credit and we set it for at the end of this calendar year, we would have captured those that are able to come to fruition between now and that time, correct?
Yep.
Based off of your estimation of effort. Okay.
So I did not, we did not have time to go through and individually verify those remaining 70-some credit refund worksheets and their particular status. It's something that certainly, if the board would like to see those specific details, we can crunch those numbers. But I can, and I would agree generally with Lisa's comment. Perhaps I overstated that the majority of those projects are awaiting a response from the applicant. What I can do is give you our current breakdown of all of the projects that are essentially, and one of the phases that we refer to as part of like the technical review process. So currently we have 100 and I'll just go with the previous numbers because more than likely the current numbers are including some new applications that we've received that don't have a credit refund worksheet on file. So the previous numbers as of a couple of weeks ago were that there are 102 projects that are basically, I don't want to use the word stuck, but still working through the technical review component of the Appendix C review process. Of those 102, we have 28 that we've requested info from the applicant, and that we have not received the requested information. There are 5 projects that are sort of on the county's plate to respond to and finalize. There are 25 projects that are requiring a resubmission of their Appendix C as a result of the review process. And there are 44 projects that basically need either an inspection or the post-inspection report to be completed prior to them being ready to issue. And for the projects that are stuck in kind of inspection or post-inspection phase, those are oftentimes some of our more difficult and convoluted projects that have a variety of issues, either with other agencies, excuse me, other departments, or just aren't straightforward and require a lot of back and forth and digging in documentation, and sometimes are very difficult to ascertain exactly what needs to be done, because they've got all sorts of stuff going on all over the place. So it makes it a little difficult for staff to concisely wrap up and finalize what exactly they need to do, because one of the things that we're trying to prevent is, continuing the old dynamic, which is you need to do these 5 things. Okay, I did these 5 things. Oh, well, now we realize you need to do these 3 more things, and that's sort of a dynamic that isn't met with, pleasure by the applicant. So that's us really trying to, consolidate everything and provide a very complete list of all of the action items that are required for that project to be in compliance and be ready for the license to be issued.
Of the 102 that are, we'll say, in limbo, how many of those do you think are post-refund applicants?
How many would have a credit refund worksheet?
Not have one.
Well, I would say that it's likely 30 or 40, just based on the rough numbers that we have 70 some credit refund worksheets outstanding. I can certainly dig through that information and give you finalized numbers if for the next meeting, if that's helpful to kind of come to a final decision.
I don't know that the exact numbers should drive the decision. I think policy really should drive the decision. I wonder if this board were to say that there was a deadline by the end of the calendar year, accepting those for whom difficulties beyond their ability to drive a date were looked at on an individual basis. Is that direction that is something that would be comfortable for staff to walk out, or do you need something that's more specific? Is that not a question I should ask?
No, that's a fine question to ask.
Okay.
I was just gonna just provide a little more information. CEO Tutnell, we're talking about the proper procedure to move forward. In terms of providing direction, you can provide direction today. But if you're going to make any action to modify the previous action of the board in 2020, we would need to put it back on as an action item.
Got it.
And so I just want to make sure it's kind of a fine line, because giving direction to bring back more information is absolutely appropriate. Giving direction to make refunds or to do anything of that nature would not be at this meeting.
Got it, for sure. Okay.
And I have a question along those lines. So if we wanted to give direction to staff to say, okay, just move forward how you've been moving, but on any application deemed inactive, you don't give this refund. Is that changing stuff? Do we need to bring that back to the board?
So yes, in looking at, CEO Tuthill pulled up the original agenda item that authorized it, and it was pretty broad. Didn't have those specifications about exceptions, which I'd consider that to be an exception. So I would recommend bringing that back for formal clarification.
So just to give thought to direction we could be providing, what comes to mind for me is that we establish a deadline by which we will no longer receive. And again, this would be something that would be recommendation for staff to create something for the board to consider. But that we set a deadline where we'll no longer receive requests, and we set a deadline for which we will no longer process them. That if it's not done by this date, then it's void. It's just disappeared. And given that by the time we would hear this, it would be 2 years already. I don't have concerns about doing that. And I do acknowledge Lisa's comments about, to the extent that our own resource limitations are holding up the process, then we need to own up to that, and we need to address that. And I would think we might even be able to, in our staff direction, give our CAO some leeway in addressing that with the applicants and so forth. But given that, my suggestion would be that we direct staff to pull together something for board consideration that puts an end date for receiving requests of October 31st, 2023. It's 2 weeks. We had 2 years. And that they would have to have been processed and completed by December 31st, 2023, or they are no longer valid. And that somewhere in there, if the staff came back with a good way to look at it, to say that even, maybe the CAO has authority to identify the applications which should continue beyond that date because of staff limitations in processing or something, so that we don't just universally or get caught up in the public thinking, oh, well, the phrase stonewalling, you basically stalled this out long enough so you wouldn't have to give the money back. And that's not the intent that I don't think anybody up here wants, but so that's a starting point.
My direction would be to agendize this for as soon as possible, so we could actually have an action item. That way we can have the discussion up here, and we'll undoubtedly really have some good discussion.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. This was enacted via a board motion. So that we don't have to do amendment to an ordinance or a resolution or anything like that. We can just bring this back based upon this direction and this discussion, which is what we wanted to have. And we can bring that back as soon as possible.
Okay,
Agreed.
agreed. All right.
Agreed.
So is everybody in agreement with the dates and the process that I was describing?
I'm not sure I'm in agreement with your date.
Okay, go ahead.
The October 31st date, I would have an issue with, because we wouldn't see it at the board until November 7th.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, I see. So we'd be setting a date that's before we have a chance to set the date.
Right.
Okay. So November 15th, maybe,
or November
or
7th,
as soon as practical after it's back to the board. How about that?
or we'll have more discussion at the board meeting with public comment, and who knows what our date ends up being.
And county council, we could, if we had a date and we could change that date at the time, that would be a minor revision, correct?
Well, yes, absolutely. We're not doing this by ordinance, so you can make those changes during the meeting.
Okay.
All right. Are you clear on your direction?
Yeah, let me just ask one clarifying question, which is, I'm clear on, I think, generally where we've landed. Do you all want to see additional data or information for this next board item for the future, or are you pretty satisfied with the information that was presented today Basically, do you want me to go back through and give you more refined numbers? Or are you good to make a decision with the information that you have received currently?
I think what you provided here at the end about the 102 projects would be helpful about the 72.
Okay.
Or 72 plus if there's a floodgate opened because of this conversation and you receive more before the next meeting. But if you were able to just say of these that we're still trying to work through that have applied for the credit, here's kind of generally their status. I get that there's a lot of nuance to that, but that kind of summary level I think would be helpful.
And then as far as the exceptions that Margaret mentioned in terms of, if there are some timeline related delays on staff's part, one example would be that we have some, let's say, legal questions that need to be resolved before we issue a license, that, that we capture that as an exception. And I think that, that can be done at the future board meeting. So,
okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right. All right, that concludes the open session portion of our meeting. Moving into closed session. Item 4.1, Government Code Section 54954.5C, conference with legal counsel, anticipation of litigation, number of cases 1. Item 4.2, Government Code Section 54954.5F, conference with labor negotiators, counties designated representatives, Margaret Long and Susie Hawkins, employee organizations, Deputy Sheriff's Association and HHS unit. Item 4.3, Government Code Section 549.569D 2 and 3, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, 1 potential case, complaint of alleged harassment against a member of the Board of Supervisors. Is there any public comment in the room on closed session? Seeing none, is there any on Zoom?
I have no raised hands, no chats.
All right, with that, we will close public comment and adjourn the open session portion of our meeting.